The January wind cut through my thin coat as I stepped out of the taxi onto Park Avenue. I should have worn something warmer, but Claire had insisted I wear this burgundy dress. "It shows you're trying, Eliza," she'd said. My sister meant well, but she didn't understand what it was like to enter a world you didn't belong in. "Mrs. Collins?" The doorman nodded politely, checking his list. "Welcome to the Harrison Foundation Annual Gala." I smoothed my dress nervously. 5 years of marriage to Thomas, and I still felt like an imposter at these events. My husband was somewhere inside, probably charming potential investors for his struggling architectural firm. That's why we were here. Connections, not celebration. The marble lobby of the plaza gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Women in designer gowns glided past, their jewelry catching the light. I recognized a few faces from charity events and dinner parties, New York's elite, the circle my husband desperately wanted to join. "Eliza!" Thomas appeared beside me, his handsome face slightly flushed. "You made it. I was worried you'd back out." He kissed my cheek perfunctorily, his eyes already scanning the room over my shoulder. I said I'd come. I tried to keep the hurt from my voice. "Your big night, remember?" Right. He squeezed my arm. "Look, Robert Harrison is over there with his wife. I need to speak with him about the West Side project. It could save the firm." Before I could respond, he was gone, weaving through the crowd toward a silver-haired man in an impeccable tuxedo. I stood alone, clutching my small purse, wondering how long I needed to stay before I could slip away unnoticed. "Would you like some champagne, Mom?" A server appeared with a tray. "Thank you." I took a glass, grateful for something to do with my hands. I made my way to a less crowded corner, observing the room. These people had known each other for generations. Same prep schools, same Ivy League universities, same summer homes in the Hamptons. I'd grown up in a small town in Pennsylvania, worked my way through State College, and met Thomas when he was just starting his firm, before his ambitions consumed him. "Is that her, Thomas Collins's wife?" The whisper was just loud enough for me to hear. I turned slightly to see a group of women nearby, led by Vanessa Pierce, wife of investment banker James Pierce, and more relevantly, Thomas's ex-girlfriend from his Harvard days. Yes, that's her. Vanessa's gaze traveled from my dress to my shoes with calculated precision. The small-town girl. I hear she teaches at some public school in Queens. 4th grade at Elmhurst Elementary, I wanted to say, where I make a difference every day. Instead, I took another sip of champagne and pretended not to hear. "She shouldn't even be here," Vanessa whispered to her friends, loud enough to ensure I caught every word. Thomas was on track to partner at Goldman before he met her. Now look at him, scrambling for clients with that failing boutique firm. Their laughter burned like acid. I took a deep breath, letting the dress do its work. At least I looked the part, even if I couldn't play it convincingly. I spotted Thomas across the room, animatedly talking to Robert Harrison. Thomas had been obsessed with the West Side development project for months, a luxury residential complex that could put his firm on the map. But Harrison had been non-committal, and our savings were dwindling. "Ladies and gentlemen," the room quieted as Robert Harrison himself took the center of the floor, champagne glass in hand. At 65, he commanded attention, self-made billionaire, philanthropist, kingmaker in New York real estate. "Thank you all for coming tonight. The Harrison Foundation is proud to announce our initiative for sustainable urban development." I watched Thomas's face fall slightly. This wasn't about the West Side project. "Before I continue," Harrison said, his eyes scanning the room, "I want to acknowledge someone who's inspired much of our new direction." The crowd murmured expectantly. Vanessa straightened her posture, clearly anticipating recognition for her charity work. Harrison's gaze stopped on me. "A few months ago, I visited Elmhurst Elementary in Queens. A teacher there had her students design their dream neighborhood, considering not just aesthetics, but environmental impact, community spaces, affordable housing. It changed my perspective on what responsible development should look like." The room turned to follow his gaze. I felt the blood rush to my face. That teacher is here tonight, Eliza Collins. Harrison raised his glass. It's her. Her vision that convinced me to completely reimagine the West Side project. In fact, I'd like to announce tonight that Collins Architecture will be leading the design, incorporating the principles Mrs. Collins's students so brilliantly illustrated. The entire room froze. Vanessa's mouth hung open in shock. Thomas stared at me in disbelief. Except me. I stood perfectly still, remembering the class project I'd sent to the Harrison Foundation on a whim, never expecting anyone would actually read it. To Eliza Collins, Harrison said, who reminded an old man that the future belongs to those who can imagine it better. As glasses raised around the room, I caught Thomas's eye across the crowd. For the first time in years, he was looking at me, really looking at me, with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. You never told me you submitted that project to the Harrison Foundation. Thomas's voice was tight as our taxi crawled through midtown traffic. The lights of the city streaked past the window, blurring like my thoughts. Would you have listened if I had? I asked quietly. 5 years of having my ideas dismissed had taught me to keep some things to myself. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. We rode in silence back to our apartment in Astoria, modest by Manhattan standards but stretching our budget nonetheless. Thomas had insisted on it, claiming proximity to potential clients justified the expense. Now those same clients were calling him because of me. Our apartment was dark when we arrived. Thomas immediately poured himself a scotch, the amber liquid catching the city lights through our windows. Harrison wants us, you and me, at his office tomorrow morning to discuss the project, he finally said. Apparently he's been following your classroom blog for months. I sank onto our sofa, still in my burgundy dress. My what? Your class blog, the one where you post your students' projects. Harrison's granddaughter is in 4th grade at some private school on the Upper East Side. Her teacher shared your blog as an example of innovative education. Thomas laughed without humor. All this time, I've been networking at country clubs and charity galas, and you reached Robert Harrison through a children's art project. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Thomas, this is your chance. Our chance. The West Side project will save the firm. He looked at me then, his expression unreadable. It's a $50 million contract, Eliza, the largest in the company's history. My breath caught. That kind of money meant security, expansion, everything Thomas had been working toward, but his face remained troubled. What is it? I asked. He set down his glass. Harrison wants you involved in the design process, not just as inspiration, as a consultant. He thinks your perspective is valuable. The way he said perspective made it clear what he thought of my input. I'd studied urban planning before switching to education, but Thomas had never considered my background relevant to his work. And that bothers you? I stated flatly. No, it's just... He ran a hand through his hair. This is what I do, Eliza. Architecture is my field. You teach 4th graders to make dioramas out of shoeboxes. The dismissal stung, but I was too tired to fight. We can talk about it tomorrow. It's late. Morning brought a flurry of activity. Thomas was uncharacteristically nervous, changing his tie 3 times before settling on a blue silk one I'd given him for Christmas 2 years ago. I chose a simple navy dress and low heels, professional but not trying too hard. The Harrison Group headquarters occupied the top floors of a gleaming skyscraper in Midtown. The elevator whisked us up 60 floors in seconds, my stomach dropping both from the ascent and anticipation. Mr. and Mrs. Collins. Robert Harrison himself greeted us in the reception area, dressed in a casual sweater and slacks that probably cost more than our monthly rent. Thank you for coming on such short notice. He led us to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The table was already occupied by several people with laptops and coffee cups. Harrison's executive team, I presumed. Before we begin, Harrison said, I'd like to introduce someone. A side door opened, and in walked Vanessa Pierce. My heart sank. Vanessa is heading our sustainability initiatives, Harrison explained. She'll be working closely with both of you on this project. Thomas tensed beside me. Vanessa's smile was professional, but her eyes were cold when they met mine. "What a pleasant surprise," she said, her voice honey-coated steel. "I had no idea you were interested in urban development, Eliza. Such a departure from elementary education." "Not really," I replied evenly. "Both are about building foundations for the future." Harrison nodded approvingly. "Precisely the perspective we need. Now, let me show you what we've been working on." As the presentation unfolded, featuring preliminary sketches and environmental impact studies, I found myself drawn into the conversation. The West Side project wasn't just another luxury development. Harrison envisioned a mixed-use community with affordable housing units, green spaces, and sustainable energy solutions. "What about integrating community gardens on the rooftops?" I suggested during a discussion about green spaces. "My students' families in Queens have created amazing urban gardens in limited spaces. It builds community and addresses food desert issues." "Interesting." Harrison made a note. "Vanessa, could your team look into the feasibility?" Vanessa's smile tightened. "Of course, though I wonder if luxury condo buyers will want community gardens rather than private terraces." "Actually," Thomas interjected, surprising me, "we could design hybrid spaces, private areas that open to communal sections. It creates a sense of exclusivity while fostering community." I glanced at him, grateful for the support. "That's exactly the kind of innovative thinking I want," Harrison said. "This project needs to break the mold of traditional luxury developments." As the meeting continued, I found my voice growing stronger. Years of managing a classroom of 9-year-olds had taught me to be clear and direct. Thomas contributed technical expertise, occasionally building on my suggestions in ways that showed he was actually listening to me. 3 hours later, as we prepared to leave, Harrison pulled me aside. "Your husband is talented, Mrs. Collins, but you bring something unique to this project. I'd like you to consider taking a sabbatical from teaching to work with us full-time." I blinked in surprise. "Mr. Harrison, Robert, please." He smiled warmly. "Think about it. This could be the beginning of something important." In the elevator, Thomas was jubilant. "Did you see how they responded to the terrace design concept? This is going to work, Eliza. This is everything." I nodded, still processing Harrison's offer. "Thomas, he wants me to take a sabbatical to work on this full-time." The elevator slowed, and so did Thomas's enthusiasm. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd think about it." The doors opened to the lobby, where Vanessa stood waiting for another elevator. She smiled when she saw us. "Thomas, Eliza, what a productive meeting." Her gaze lingered on Thomas. "Just like old times working together. Remember our study sessions at Harvard? You always had the most brilliant ideas." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "That was a long time ago, Vanessa." "Not so long." She touched his arm briefly. "We should catch up properly. Drinks this week?" "To discuss the project, of course." Before either of us could respond, her elevator arrived, and she stepped in with a final pointed smile. "I'll have my assistant call yours, Thomas." As the doors closed on her perfectly composed face, I felt a cold certainty settle in my stomach. This project might save Thomas's firm, but I suddenly wondered what it might cost our marriage. Spring bloomed in New York, but I barely noticed. 3 months into the West Side project, my life had transformed completely. I'd taken the sabbatical Harrison offered, my classroom temporarily in the hands of a long-term substitute, while I split my time between the Harrison Group offices and Thomas's firm. Today found me at Collins Architecture, reviewing design modifications in the conference room that had become my unofficial workspace. Sketches and models surrounded me, along with coffee cups and takeout containers, evidence of the long hours we'd been keeping. "These community space renderings are impressive," I said as Thomas entered, his tie loosened after a meeting with contractors. The students' feedback really shaped something special here. Harrison had loved my suggestion to involve my fourth-grade class as junior consultants, bringing them to the site and incorporating their ideas. The publicity had been incredible. Billionaire developer takes cues from fourth graders, made headlines across architectural journals and local news. Thomas set down his briefcase, surveying the organized chaos I'd created in his pristine office. The construction team thinks we can break ground by August if the final permits come through. That's fantastic. I smiled, but his expression remained distant. This had become our new normal, professional collaboration overlaying personal disconnection. Thomas, is everything okay? He checked his watch. I have another meeting in 30 minutes with Vanessa about the sustainability certifications. Of course. Another meeting with Vanessa. They had become increasingly frequent, always with legitimate professional justifications. I'd seen them together at the office, heads bent close over documents, sharing private jokes, touching casually in ways that seemed unnecessary. Will you be home for dinner? I asked, already knowing the answer. Don't wait up. These certification details are complicated. After he left, I stared at the model of what would become the West Side development. Thomas's professional salvation and, ironically, possibly our marriage's undoing. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert Harrison. Need your input on something important. Free for dinner tonight. 2 hours later, I sat across from Harrison at a quiet table in an upscale restaurant overlooking Central Park. Spring evening light filtered through the windows, casting a golden glow over the white tablecloths. Thank you for meeting me on such short notice, Harrison said, his silver hair catching the light. I wanted to discuss something away from the office. A server poured wine, an expensive vintage I pretended to appreciate. 3 months in this world had taught me to mimic its customs, but I still felt like an observer rather than a participant. Is everything all right with the project? I asked. The project is exceeding expectations. Harrison smiled. That's partly why I wanted to talk to you. Your contributions have been invaluable, Eliza. You've brought a humanity to this development that was missing. Thank you, but Thomas is the real architect here. Harrison studied me for a moment. Your husband is talented, certainly, but you have a vision that extends beyond buildings to the people who will inhabit them. He set down his glass. Which brings me to my proposition. I'm establishing a new division within the Harrison Group focused on community-centered development. I'd like you to head it. I nearly choked on my wine. Me? But I'm a teacher, not. You're exactly what we need. Someone who understands communities from the ground up. The position comes with a substantial salary, of course. 7 figures plus equity in the projects you develop. The amount he mentioned casually would solve every financial worry Thomas and I had ever faced. No more arguments about mortgage payments or retirement savings. No more budget grocery shopping or putting off home repairs. This is unexpected, I managed. Take some time to think about it. Talk it over with Thomas. Harrison paused. Though I get the impression things might be strained between you two lately. My surprise must have shown, because he added gently, I've been in business a long time, Eliza. I notice things, including how often your husband and Vanessa Pierce seem to be working late together. Heat rushed to my face. Was it that obvious to everyone? It's just work, I said, not entirely believing it myself. Harrison nodded diplomatically. Of course. Just know that my offer stands independently of your husband's involvement with the firm. This is about your talents, not his. I returned to an empty apartment that night, Harrison's offer echoing in my mind. A position like that would change everything. My career, my financial independence, my identity beyond being Thomas's wife or Ms. Collins the teacher. I was still awake when Thomas came home after midnight, his collar unbuttoned and hair slightly disheveled. You're up late, he said, surprised to find me on the sofa with a cup of tea. Harrison offered me a job. The words tumbled out before I could frame them more carefully. To head a new division, community development. Thomas froze in the act of removing his jacket. What kind of job? Director level, my own team, projects across the country. I took a breath. The salary is substantial. How substantial? I told him. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, confusion, and something that looked uncomfortably like resentment. That's more than I make, he finally said. Significantly more. It's not about the money, Thomas, isn't it? He dropped onto the sofa opposite me. 3 months ago, you were grading spelling tests. Now you're being offered an executive position by one of the most powerful developers in the country. You have to admit it's unusual. The implication hung in the air between us. Are you suggesting Harrison's interest in my work is something other than professional? Thomas had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm just saying it's a dramatic change. People will talk. Like they talk about you and Vanessa. The words were out before I could stop them. Thomas's face hardened. That's different. Vanessa and I have history. We understand each other professionally. Is that all it is? Professional understanding? He stood up abruptly. I don't want to fight, Eliza. It's late and I'm tired. We need to talk about this, Thomas, about us. When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about the West Side project? What do you want me to say? That I'm thrilled my wife is being offered a job that will overshadow everything I've worked for? That I enjoy watching Robert Harrison treat you like you're the architectural genius instead of me? The bitterness in his voice confirmed what I'd suspected for months. This wasn't just about Vanessa. It was about me stepping out of the supportive wife role he'd cast me in, about the shift in our power dynamic. I never asked for any of this, I said quietly. I was happy teaching, but now that it's happening, I need to know if we're still partners, Thomas. Real partners. He rubbed his face tiredly. I don't know, Eliza. I honestly don't know anymore. The truth hung between us in the half-light of our living room. Whatever happened next would change everything. The West Side Development groundbreaking ceremony unfolded under a perfect June sky. A white tent stood on the construction site, filled with New York's elite mingling over mimosas and coffee, while photographers captured every moment. I watched from the periphery as Thomas charmed investors, handsome and confident in his tailored suit. He'd become increasingly distant at home, but here in his professional element, he radiated the charisma that had first drawn me to him. Quite the turnout. Robert Harrison appeared beside me in a light grey suit. Your husband seems to be enjoying the spotlight. He's worked hard for this moment, I said diplomatically. As have you. Harrison studied me. Have you considered my offer? The job offer had lingered between Thomas and me for weeks. An unresolved tension neither of us seemed ready to address. I'm still thinking it through, I replied. Don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. Vanessa Pierce approached us, immaculate in a cream-colored dress. Robert, I need to discuss some presentation changes with Thomas. Her smile deliberately excluded me. Eliza, I'm surprised to see you here. I thought elementary teachers would be busy with end-of-year activities. I'm still on sabbatical, I reminded her, matching her artificial warmth. How nice that the school system is so flexible. She turned away. Robert, would you excuse us? I watched her walk directly to Thomas, whose face brightened visibly. They moved toward the stage area, heads close in conversation. Vanessa's been angling for the sustainability director position in my new division, Harrison murmured. She'd report to you if you take my offer. She and Thomas seem very in sync, I observed, unable to hide my discomfort. Harrison's gaze was knowing. They dated in college, I understand, before he met you. The ceremony began with predictable speeches before Thomas took the podium. I felt a familiar pride watching him. This was his moment, the culmination of years of struggle. The West Side development represents a new paradigm in urban living, Thomas declared. My vision was to create not just buildings, but community, spaces where people connect, where families grow, where sustainability isn't just a buzzword, but a way of life. My vision. The pronoun stung. No mention of collaborative design, of fourth-grade consultants, of his wife's contributions. Before we break ground, I want to acknowledge some key people who made this project possible. He thanked Harrison, the investors, city officials, his talented team at Collins Architecture. He even thanked Vanessa specifically for her invaluable input on sustainability features. Not once did he mention my name. I slipped out quietly, needing air that wasn't thick with pretense. Outside, the construction site stretched before me, currently just dirt and foundations, but soon to become the physical manifestation of ideas I'd helped create. Ideas now claimed by others. Eliza, Harrison had followed me. "Are you all right?" "Just needed some fresh air," I managed. "You know, when I was building my first major project, my business partner took all the credit at the opening ceremony. Never mentioned my name once." "What did you do?" "Started my own company the next day." Harrison smiled. "Sometimes being overlooked is the push we need to step into our own light." Thomas appeared, flushed with triumph. "There you are. They're about to do the ceremonial groundbreaking. Harrison, they need you for the photos." As Harrison walked away, Thomas gripped my arm. "Where did you go?" "It looks bad. The lead architect's wife disappearing during his big moment." "Is that all I am to you now?" "The lead architect's wife?" His expression hardened. "This isn't the time or place, Eliza. You didn't mention me once in your speech, after everything I've contributed. It was a professional presentation, not a time to give shout-outs to family members." The dismissal took my breath away. "Family members? Is that how you see my role in all this?" Vanessa approached, touching Thomas's arm possessively. "They're waiting for you for the photos." She barely acknowledged me. "The investors are particularly interested in hearing more about the rooftop design." "I'll be right there." Thomas turned back to me. "We'll talk about this later." As they walked away together, I noticed Vanessa's hand lingering on the small of Thomas's back, a proprietary gesture, a familiar one. In that moment watching them, something shifted inside me, a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I pulled out my phone and dialed Harrison's private number. "Robert, it's Eliza Collins. About that job offer I'd like to accept, with one condition. I want to start immediately, and I want to head up the Chicago development personally." His response was immediate. "Done. I'll have the paperwork ready tomorrow." I ended the call just as the ceremonial shovels broke ground, cameras flashing. Thomas stood center stage, Vanessa nearby, both smiling for the press. Neither noticed me walking away. That evening, I packed a suitcase in our empty apartment. Thomas was at the celebration dinner, another event where the lead architect's wife was expected to play her supporting role. I left the emerald earrings I'd found in his briefcase on his pillow, along with a note. "I've accepted Harrison's offer to head the new Community Development Division, starting with the Chicago project. I'll be gone for at least 6 months. By then, I think we'll both know whether there's anything left to save between us. Congratulations on the West Side project. It will be beautiful, even with all the compromises. Eliza." As my taxi headed toward the airport, the New York skyline glittered against the night sky. Somewhere in that constellation of lights was a celebration where my husband might already be discovering my absence, where Vanessa Pierce might be offering comfort, where my future was being discussed by people who thought they knew me. But for the first time in years, I wasn't defined by their perceptions. I was Eliza Collins, heading to Chicago to build something new, something mine. And unlike the buildings I'd helped create, this foundation wouldn't be compromised.